Prince Harry appeared in court with a visible emotional weight, his voice breaking as he spoke about the intense pressures and unfair scrutiny his wife has endured. The courtroom went silent. Observers paused mid-note, sensing something unusual. The Duke of Sussex, a man raised amid privilege and attention, was breaking down publicly, his grief focused on media coverage of Meghan Markle. On the surface, this seemed like a personal revelation, but a closer look reveals a much more complicated picture. The case at hand, however, was not about Meghan at all. It concerned publications from 2001 to 2013, years before Harry ever met Meghan in 2016. Yet, in the courtroom, he repeatedly referenced her suffering, intertwining her experiences with allegations from long before she was in his life. Insiders note that Harry has become unable to separate his grievances from Meghan entirely. Every perceived slight, every injury, every injustice seems to funnel back to her. One observer described the testimony as watching a man fight a battle that doesn't exist, highlighting how Harry's personal devotion to Meghan has overtaken the legal focus. Originally, the lawsuit targeted claims of phone hacking and unauthorized information gathering during Harry's more carefree years, a time marked by public antics and nightlife escapades that tabloids thrived on covering. At its core, the case was linked to Chelsea Davy, a woman who had been Harry's partner years ago and whose experiences with the press formed the legal foundation. Yet Harry's testimony repeatedly drifted to Meghan, creating a curious disconnect. Courtroom analysts described it as answering the wrong exam questions, with Harry unable to keep the narrative tied to the actual allegations. According to insiders, Harry's motivations seem rooted less in justice and more in protecting his wife. He believes that if he can confront the British tabloids and secure a legal victory, Meghan will finally be free of unhappiness. While touching, this perception is tragically flawed. Friends suggest that even the most decisive legal outcomes cannot address Meghan's deeper sources of dissatisfaction. One former royal staffer described it as fighting a war for someone who may never feel content. This tension was amplified when the defense introduced a surprising twist, evidence of a Facebook account called Mr. Mischief allegedly linked to Harry, which he used to communicate with journalists. This revelation challenged his victim narrative, suggesting that he had engaged willingly with the press, undermining claims of relentless persecution. Harry denied any connection to the account, but the moment left courtroom observers questioning the credibility of his statements. Whether or not the account belonged to him, the mere implication raised doubts about his portrayal as a passive victim. The trial also exposed Harry's struggles with courtroom decorum. The presiding judge publicly admonished him for arguing with questions rather than providing direct answers, a rebuke that drew attention worldwide. Observers noted the discomfort. Harry, accustomed to deference throughout his life, was suddenly challenged to adhere to basic courtroom expectations. Analysts describe this as revealing both a lack of preparation and an unfamiliarity with boundaries outside royal privilege. Harry's statements about constant surveillance were similarly ironic. He spoke of lifelong scrutiny, yet chose a partner whose career was inherently public and entered media deals that commercialized their personal lives. Netflix projects, interviews, and memoirs place the Sussexes under a microscope far more intense than any traditional tabloid coverage. This tension underscores a recurring theme. Harry and Meghan's grievances often collide with the very choices they make to live publicly and profitably. Observers also highlighted contradictions in his narrative about commercialization. Harry criticized the press for exploiting his life, yet the couple has monetized their experiences extensively. The memoir detailing intimate family moments and the Netflix documentaries exposing private life demonstrate that while Harry protests intrusion, he simultaneously benefits from public exposure. This duality raises questions about the coherence of his arguments in court, even among supportive audiences. Beyond legal strategy, the testimony casts a light on Meghan's inner world. Sources suggest that her dissatisfaction does not primarily stem from negative media coverage, but rather from the gap between how she perceives herself and how the public responds. According to insiders, she expects admiration and deference that the press cannot provide, and when it does not arrive, her mood affects everyone around her. Harry's attempts to shield her from criticism, while well-intentioned, may be addressing the wrong problem entirely. The contrast between Harry's approach and Chelsea Davies' current life is striking. Chelsea, who actually experienced tabloid scrutiny during Harry's youthful years, has moved on, avoiding litigation and public obsession. She has built a stable life away from royal headlines, focusing on family, career, and privacy. Harry, by contrast, remains entangled in disputes over past media coverage, with Meghan as the focal point. This divergence underscores the personal dimension of his lawsuit. It is not merely legal, but deeply intertwined with loyalty, identity, and perception. Sources also indicate that Harry's constant travel serves a dual purpose: humanitarian appearances on the surface and escape from domestic tension at home. Montecito, the couple's $16 million mansion, is described as emotionally fraught, with Meghan's dissatisfaction affecting Harry profoundly. Friends suggest that Harry's efforts to fix her unhappiness are limited by a fundamental misunderstanding. The problem is not the press, but the environment and expectations within their household. Even with potential legal victories, insiders suggest outcomes will not alleviate the couple's underlying struggles. Harry's devotion to shielding Meghan cannot resolve her expectations, nor can it alter public perception in the ways he hopes. Analysts highlight that lawsuits might provide temporary satisfaction, but will leave the structural and personal challenges untouched, creating a cycle of frustration and perceived injustice.
The courtroom proceedings offered further insight into Harry's complex relationship with scrutiny, privilege, and personal responsibility. Legal observers noted repeated inconsistencies, particularly regarding his awareness of tabloid practices during his early adult years. While Harry presented himself as unaware of unauthorized media activities, evidence shows that similar cases affected his own family, making his claims of ignorance difficult to reconcile. This discrepancy has fueled criticism that he selectively interprets facts to support a narrative of persecution. Observers were also struck by the stark contrast between Harry's current life and the era he criticized. In his 20s, he embraced a lifestyle that attracted media attention. Nightclubs, parties, and public antics provided ample fodder for tabloids. Today, he criticizes that same coverage while engaging in ventures that maximize exposure and financial gain. This juxtaposition, according to media analysts, highlights the tension between personal accountability and entitlement. The trial revealed an underlying pattern. Harry's testimony frequently pivots from factual recounting to emotional appeals centered on Meghan. Courtroom watchers describe this as an obsessive focus that distracts from the core legal issues. It underscores a psychological dimension. Harry appears driven more by devotion and loyalty to his wife than by legal strategy or factual argumentation. Critics also point to Meghan's role in shaping the narrative. Sources suggest that her dissatisfaction is amplified by perceived gaps between public recognition and her self-image. The resulting tension creates a feedback loop. Harry's interventions to shield her from criticism reinforce the belief that external forces are to blame, further entrenching her unhappiness. Experts highlight that no amount of legal action can address this internalized perception, emphasizing a distinction between perception management and legal remedies. In addition, the trial introduced moments that cast doubt on Harry's consistency as a witness. The so-called Mr. Mischief account, whether linked to him or not, created a challenge to his victim narrative. Engaging with journalists under a pseudonym contradicts the image of a prince relentlessly pursued by predatory media. Observers noted that even unproven allegations can erode credibility, particularly in cases relying heavily on perceived victimhood. The judge's rebuke was another pivotal moment. Publicly instructed to adhere to courtroom procedure, Harry's discomfort highlighted his unfamiliarity with strict accountability outside royal privilege. Analysts emphasize that emotional testimony, while compelling, cannot replace adherence to rules or undermine the credibility of opposing evidence. The scene illustrated the limits of personal influence in a system governed by law rather than status. Further, Harry's claims about constant surveillance were contrasted with the couple's own choices. From Netflix projects to memoirs, the Sussexes have repeatedly invited public attention. Analysts note the irony. Seeking privacy while monetizing exposure creates a complex, sometimes contradictory dynamic, which weakens his arguments about intrusion and exploitation. Chelsea Davies' absence from the case provides another layer of perspective. She endured scrutiny firsthand, but chose to disengage and move forward, demonstrating resilience and personal accountability. Harry's fixation on past grievances, juxtaposed with Chelsea's ability to leave the past behind, underscores how personal attachment and emotional investment can distort one's perception of justice and responsibility. The trial also illuminated broader misunderstandings about public life. As a taxpayer-funded royal, Harry once enjoyed privileges alongside scrutiny. Unlike William and Catherine, who accept the balance of visibility and accountability, Harry and Meghan appear to pursue an idealized version of life, free from critical evaluation. Analysts suggest this disconnect fuels ongoing frustration and reinforces a pattern of litigation and complaint as a substitute for resolution. Inside Montecito, the emotional dynamics are reportedly intense. Insiders describe Meghan's moods as strongly influenced by media coverage, which in turn impacts Harry. Observers suggest that Harry's efforts to alleviate this tension reflect a misdirected focus. Protecting someone from media scrutiny does not address deeper dissatisfaction rooted in expectations and perception. The result is a cycle of frustration, legal battles, and emotional strain. Ultimately, experts assert that even a complete legal victory would not resolve the Sussexes' challenges. Negative media coverage will continue to exist, Meghan's expectations will persist, and the emotional patterns inside their household will remain largely unchanged. Friends express concern that Harry may already sense this reality, but is compelled by loyalty and devotion to continue fighting battles he cannot win. The courtroom drama, therefore, is less about justice than about perception, loyalty, and emotional investment. Harry's public breakdowns, legal arguments, and confrontations with the judge reveal a man navigating complex personal loyalties while struggling to reconcile privilege, responsibility, and devotion. In the end, the case illustrates not only legal contention, but also the limits of control over public narrative, personal relationships, and emotional satisfaction.